Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today to the last community network workshop for the 2025 Urban Water Management Plan. We're going to go to the next slide. So we're going to start out with some welcome and introductions. We're going to talk about an overview of the draft and what we've been doing so far to update it, look at some of the key findings, discuss how the plan is organized, and then review how to submit a public comment if you're interested. So we'll start with welcome and introductions. So my name is Sarah Fleury. I am a senior water resource planner at SCV Water, and I'm the project manager for the Urban Water Management Plan. We also have Ali Al Hassan, Director of Water Resources, here to support if there's any other questions. And then in addition, we have some amazing consultants. We've got Melissa Matlock, Katie Evans, and Ariel O'Callahan, who have just been amazing in supporting our staff to make sure that we get all of our plan updated as needed. So I'm going to pass it now to Katie Evans to kind of go through introductions for the Woodard and Kern team. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. So I'm Katie Evans. I am the Senior Communications Strategist at Woodard and Kern, and my role on this project is to work with the community and the public to ensure that we develop a plan that meets your needs. So we've held a number of workshops and we've worked closely with our community, with local agencies to make sure that we're engaging on data and plan needs and uses. With me today is Melissa Matlock, our project manager, and Ariel O'Callahan, who has helped on some of our technical work. You can see from this org chart that we have a very deep bench of technical experts who are working on this plan, and we've done a great deal of analysis that I think is going to be very useful to those of you in the Santa Clarita Valley service area and the community. We'd also like to hear from you. While this is a webinar, so you can't come off mute, we would like you to add your name and why you're interested in urban water management planning into the chat, so that we can do our best to tailor our presentation tonight to meet your needs. And before we go any further, I want to take a moment to thank you for your participation in this process. This process has been going on for nearly a year, and we have engaged with the community a great deal. So if you have been involved the whole time, or tonight is your first time engaging with this process, or anything in between, we are extremely grateful for your participation. This urban water management plan was developed with a lot of engagement involved. We started with a board visioning workshop. We've had multiple community and public network workshops. We've had meetings in person. We've had virtual meetings. We've also had individual meetings with agencies and organizations that have specific needs or interests in the plan. We've had ongoing coordination with our local government agencies and other partners. And all of that input has really helped to shape this plan into what it is now. It's helped us with planning assumptions. It's helped us identify our areas of key focus. And it's really helped us understand how we need to present information and how we need to explain what we have found through our data and analysis in a way that makes it useful to you. So before we get into the details of the Santa Clarita Valley Water Plan, I want to talk a little bit about what an urban water management plan is in general. So an urban water management plan is required by the state of California from urban water suppliers every 5 years. It needs to have a 20-year planning horizon, and it has to be submitted to the state by July 1st every 5 years on that 5-year mark. It also has to be adopted by the agency's board of directors. So when we talk about developing this plan, we start with those dates and we really have to work backwards from there to make sure that we're meeting those deadlines while still being able to incorporate all of the technical work that needs to be done and all of the community engagement that we want to participate in. Realistically, though, at its foundation, the urban water management plan effort asks a couple of important questions of water agencies. The first is, do we have enough water for the next 20 years? That is a critical question that we answer via urban water management plans. Next is, how do we plan for growth and for climate change? Then, what are the risks to our water supplies and what can we do about it? And how will we stretch our water supplies in dry years? So we're looking at water supplies all the way through this plan, but we're also taking a very hard look at what do we do in situations of drought. That's a really important component of urban water management planning efforts. So the state of California has some specific requirements about what is in an urban water management plan. The first is that we look at water use by sector. So we're looking at what businesses use, we're looking at what construction uses, we're looking at what residential homes are using. Then we're taking a very detailed look at our supply sources. In this instance, it's imported water, recycled water, and groundwater, in addition to reserves, which we'll talk about in a moment. But we have to take a really good look at what those are and describe where our water is coming from. It's also important that we include a description of water quality impacts or issues that could impact our water supply. So, for example, if we have a water supply now that we're able to use, but we think there could be an impact to that water quality at some point, changing its use, we have to incorporate that into the conversation as well. We also take a look at the evaluation of water supply reliability in current and future demands for several hydrologic years. So we're looking at current and future demands when things are normal, when we've had multiple dry years, and when we're in a critically dry situation. All of those things need to be incorporated, and you'll see more about that later. The urban water management plan also needs to have an evaluation of what we call per capita water use, and then we have to comply with the targets that are set for that. You may have heard of this as gallons per person per day. So this is when we're taking a look at our overall population and overall water demand to determine an average of gallons used by each person each day, and whether or not those are meeting our reduction targets. We also look at what we call demand management measures, but what you might be familiar with as water conservation programs. We're taking a look at those to determine if the programs that we've done in the past have been effective, if the programs that we're doing now are working, and what programs we may need or want to implement in the future. The plan also includes some consideration of the water shortage contingency plan. The water shortage contingency plan is a separate document that goes through a separate review process and a separate analysis and a separate approval, but is the document that would be called upon in the event that there was a catastrophic outage or some other type of shortage. We saw this happening during some of the droughts that we've had over the past 10 or so years, where there's been a statewide mandate on water reduction. So we've needed to implement the water shortage contingency plan to meet those levels of reduction. So while that is a separate plan, it needs to be incorporated into this plan so we understand how it impacts our supply and demand in those situations. And lastly, we take a look at the estimate of energy intensity that our water operations are using. When we look at it from a big picture, I think this graphic does a nice job of kind of showing everything that's a part of it. But the urban water management plan is incorporating important information for our service area, for how customers are using water, also for water lost through leaks or other infrastructure failures in our system or through meters. We're also looking at new growth and development and what kind of impact that has on water. We're taking a very close look at our supply to better understand the three types of supply that we're using in this area and how reliable they are. We're looking at climate and drought scenarios. So we're looking at risk, but we're also looking specifically at that drought-related risk and how that impacts supply. And then lastly, we're taking a look at our community demographic data, one, to understand more about water demand and supply, but also to ensure that we're providing this information in a way that makes sense and is useful to our community and to those we serve. So those are all the state requirements, but I think it's also important to note that Santa Clarita Valley Water Agency wants this plan to not just be a state required document, but instead becomes a very useful reference within the community and the service area. So for the water agency, this guides long-term water management planning and helps decision makers understand things like, what are our future supply needs? Should we be investing in infrastructure? Do we need to incorporate additional conservation programs? And are we prepared for drought? But in addition to that, we want it to be a reference and a resource for others within our service area. For example, cities and counties might use this as they're doing their master planning related to growth and development in the city or county. Emergency services can take a look at this plan and better understand how their emergency situations could be impacted by water or how water could impact an emergency. And then regional and state agencies are able to use this plan to look at water on a big picture. So if everyone has a urban water management plan, and we can look at those on a regional or statewide basis, gives us a really good sense of what's going on in the region or the state. But at the end of the day, we do hope that it's a helpful planning guide for any who use it. So as I mentioned, we've been working on this urban water management plan for about a year. We started in July of 2025, and we held our first workshop with the board July 15th. We've had a series of workshops since then. And then on February 27th, we released our notice to local governments that we were going to be releasing a draft plan. So the draft plan was released March 28th, and now we are in our first public comment period. And I'll talk through what that looks like for the next few weeks or next few months. So we're now at April 1st. We are having this virtual workshop where we are presenting the plan to you, including how to review and comment on the plan. We will continue to have this public review period open through April 28th. At that point, we will close the public review. We will have a public hearing with the board of directors. And then we can take all of the comments that we've received during that first public hearing and the first public review, incorporate them into a new draft of the plan, and then start our second public review period. So the second public review period will be May 8th to June 9th. This gives everyone a second opportunity to review the plan now with those comments incorporated. And that takes us to a June 9th public hearing. Our hope is that on June 9th, the plan will be in good enough shape that the board can adopt it at that time. And then we will be able to submit it to the Department of Water Resources by July 1st. This is just a quick overview of some of the technical analysis that's gone on in the plan before I hand it over to Sarah to talk through key findings. So some of the work that's been done includes demand forecasting, water supply reliability analysis, a climate change specific analysis, and then also a seismic assessment, which really looks at the impacts of our water supply from seismic activity. So now I will hand it over to Sarah to talk us through the key findings of the plan.
Again, so I'm going to go through the key findings. So basically, one of the biggest things that we're trying to figure out when we update the urban plan, some of the big factors are, how is our community changing from what we expected 5 years ago? And there's a lot of change with development, how quickly things are moving, how much water people are using. Have we been through a drought? So that's some of the first things that we look at. And then we're really stress testing our water supply portfolio to make sure that we can meet all of these demands in every different circumstance you can think of. So we're going to go to the next slide. And so one of the big questions that we try to answer in the urban plan is how much water will we use? And this is a graphic that shows SCV water retail. The blue line represents kind of our historical demands in the past, and it goes up and down as you get a wet year or a dry year, conservation programs being implemented and so forth and so on. But since 2002, our community has been growing, but with all the conservation and efficiency efforts, you can see that overall our trend line for water demands is almost parallel. So we're looking into the future now. So we've updated all the information with regards to developments, what's coming in the future, and we've projected out 3 different potential demand projections. The first one at the top there is our baseline demand forecast. And this really just assumes what happens if people continue using water the way that they are now, just a status quo. That's kind of our high point. We don't think that's going to happen because we know that things are changing, like the plumbing code and new development that is coming in is way more efficient. So that's kind of how we go down to the second line. So the second line, which is that solid line, is our baseline, but it assumes passive conservation. So it assumes that the plumbing code is going to bring efficiencies to the new development, and that customers with older homes and older fixtures, when they go out and purchase new things, they're going to have to purchase more efficient fixtures and more efficient washing machines. So overall, even existing housing and stock is going to become more efficient. This is the demand forecast that we utilize for the urban plan. So that's what we're planning for. But there is a third line down there, that dotted line that kind of steps down. And those are the urban water use objectives. And what those are new regulatory targets that really define efficient water use for retail water suppliers. This is going to start in being regulated in the next few years. So we are projecting out what our mandated demands will have to be into the future. Now, one thing to notice on this graphic is that, historically, the trend line goes up and down, kind of wiggling around, and the future ones are all straight. So the futures are assuming just kind of average, consistent demands, but obviously, once you get different weather patterns and climate and so forth and so on, we do expect the demands to kind of wiggle up and down as well. So just know here we are going to be using the passive conservation assumptions for the urban plan. And that gives us a little bit of safety when planning for uncertainties in the future. Next slide. So the big question is now, do we have enough water to meet any of those future demands? And so we are looking out from now to 2050. We look at different things and kind of stress test our supplies now and into the future because those supplies could change. We stress those looking at the worst drought on record. What happens if we experience one of the worst droughts on record in 2045? What happens if in the future we get a 5-year drought in a row? What happens if that 5-year historical drought starts this year? And so we kind of run through all of these stress tests to see, will our supplies meet our future demands? And what that does is it tells us what, how does our portfolio perform under these different vulnerabilities to climate change and drought and weather. What are the strategies that we need to do to make sure that we can maintain our reliability into the future if there are challenges or shortages that we see? And can we get through not just maintain reliability through different circumstances, but really over time, and if there's any catastrophic events, can we handle that as well? Next slide. So one of the first things we do is look at, normal years. So just everything's normal and average. Do we have enough water in normal years to meet demands now into the future? And so when SCV water operates in normal years, usually we're just utilizing 3 main supplies. We've got our local groundwater supplies, our imported supplies from the State Water Project, and we've got local recycled water. So those are the supplies that we assume are available in normal years. Next slide. And so this is a graph that shows us kind of how much, if we're looking at all the supplies that are available into the future, what are we looking at? And this is showing us that we have, consistently about 100,000 acre feet of water available through the future. We've got our groundwater growing a little bit, but normal years, we want to make sure we're maintaining all these supplies and we're operating normally. So when we go to the next slide, we're assuming that, yes, we do have enough water in normal years to meet projected demands. And so you can see we've added that demand line there, and we've got some space above to, manage any uncertainties that could happen in normal years. And that's kind of a really good place to be. We want to make sure we're not just right at the top there. So normal years look good. That's one of our findings. And we'll go to the next slide. So the challenge is really when you get to test the reliability in your dry years. And so do we have enough water in dry years? And there's multiple scenarios that we'll run through. One of the big changes when we're evaluating dry year scenarios, we're using those three main supplies from a normal year, but we also have this additional supply, these dry year reserves that we can utilize or we operate and we utilize these reserves only when needed in droughts or catastrophic emergencies. So this would be reserves that are built up in normal years when we have surplus water. We can kind of store those away and use them in emergencies. So let's go to the next slide. And the first stress test we do is that single drought year. So when there is a flash drought circumstances for 1 year, and we kind of look at that happening in 2030 and every 5 years from that, what happens? And so you can see that we have enough supplies that will be available into the future against our demands to meet a single dry year flash drought scenario. And you'll see kind of the orange dry year reserves increasing into the future. And that assumes that we are expanding that the dry year reserve. So maybe we're adding banking programs to make sure that we have more storage available for more reserve emergencies and stuff like that. Next slide. The next test that we do is a multiple 5-year drought scenario. So basically, what we do is we mirror the worst 5-year drought that we have seen in history and pretend that that happens kind of every 5 years into the future. What happens then? And so again, we're leaning more here on our groundwater supplies. You'll see that our imported supplies that come from surface water from the State Water Project, they get constrained in drought circumstances. There's not as much snow, there's not as much rain, so there's not as much surface water available. And that's where our groundwater supplies come in very handy. So we can operate and utilize more of those local resources in times when our imported supplies are constrained. And we also have the ability to utilize those dry year reserves as well. So again, having, safety buffer kind of on the top of that with regards to supplies versus demands, but in a potential 5-year drought, consecutive drought into the future, based on our demand projections, we should be looking pretty good with regards to meeting those demands. And then there's one more that we do. So this is kind of that stress test of what happens if starting this year in 2026 we get that worst drought scenario that we've seen historically. And so this kind of shows you that when we're looking at the mirroring those 5-year droughts, in California you can have a dry year, sort of dry year, but a really dry year, and so it kind of goes up and down. So you can see, I think that this kind of shows very much the changes with regards to our imported water. So in 2026, we were pretty constrained, but in 2027, we got a little bit more. So historically, it kind of goes up and down, and this is more realistic. And we'll go to the next slide. And so, in that scenario, for the next 5 years, yes, we do have enough supplies available to meet demands. And I think that is, oh, I was going to say overall, basically, what our portfolio does demonstrate, I think, are 3 really key points. Our imported water is highly variable during the extended drought periods. Our groundwater plays a very important role in stabilizing our water supplies during those extended drought periods. And storage really acts as a buffer to help us absorb some of that variability. There's always things that can happen with any one of these supplies. So it's really good to have a portfolio that we can kind of use in different when we need different supplies pending different circumstances. So it gives us that flexibility we need. And hopefully you'll see that this plan shows that we have that flexibility at SCV Water. So I'm going to pass it back now to Melissa to go through how the plan has been organized.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, so, as you start reading the plan, it is a lot. As Katie kind of showed pretty early on, it has to be a lot because the state asks for a lot. So we want to try to walk you through a little bit of what to expect in each chapter, the type of information that's there, and then how to comment or review if you're interested. So next slide. So the urban water management plan is organized into major sections. The Department of Water Resources, who we submit this report to, laid out the sections. It lays out the requirements. The current draft urban plan actually has the water code references, so you can review why something might be in there. But generally, it goes through your introduction, how your plan was prepared, what type of outreach did you do, a general system description of who the agency serves, where it serves, population type of information. Goes into that kind of water use and demand forecast that Sarah talked about a little bit earlier. How do you plan on using water from the customers? Then it talks about water supplies. So again, talking about kind of those three major pools of buckets of supply water, and then additionally in drought years, what that kind of dry year reserves are, goes into a little bit more narrative explanation for those. Then those kind of, do we have enough supplies questions that we were bouncing around, that is our chapter 7, which is our water supply reliability and drought risk assessment. In addition, oh, go back please. Thank you. We also have a chapter on the agency's water shortage contingency plan, a chapter on the demand management and conservation measures, plan adoption and implementation, and then appendices with a lot of the technical details. And also, SCV Water has done a lot of other planning efforts that have been involved here. And so those planning efforts are linked as appropriate, including the water use efficiency strategic plan, the groundwater sustainability plan. I see someone here was showed that they had a lot of concerns about groundwater supply. So that information would be actually in the groundwater sustainability plan. And we reference that document in our urban plan. Next slide. So starting off with the system description, you're going to see a little bit about the service area overview. We're going to talk a little bit about the retail water service and how, water is kind of typically used in these areas. We also, SCV Water has sales to other agencies, specifically Los Angeles County Waterworks District 36. So we do mention what we project those demands going to look like in the future, and that we do kind of look at a much more kind of regional scale to know how the system operates, and again, be a little bit more conservative with our estimates in terms of moving forward depending on reliability. We don't want to underestimate. We want to make sure that we know if demands are what they are, we have supplies to meet them. Next slide. So the water use and demand forecasts, one of the big parts of the plan is to look at 2025. So we look at that, water use and demand forecast, and look at how that demand has played out for 2025. We look at water loss as well in this chapter. Some of the key findings we see here is that residential use is kind of the largest share of demand. Outdoor irrigation is also the biggest year-to-year variability that we see. Again, Sarah was pointing out the lines up and down on the graph. That's really due to drought. Warmer days, hotter days usually means more outdoor irrigation. Our commercial, institutional, and industrial uses, or CII, as you guys might know, are important and they're growing. And that, our recycled water currently is offsetting some meaningful portions of potable demand, and there are plans to increase that type of water supply in the future. Next slide. So our water supplies, as you saw kind of with the analysis, SCV Water relies on diversified water supply portfolio, including that imported state water project, local groundwater, recycled water, the banking and reserve programs, and then even conservation is a supply arm that we have here. Now, the Department of Water Resources oversees the state water project, so they are providing a lot of information in terms of reliability and what assessments we should use for the urban plan. For local groundwater, it is kind of overseen through a groundwater sustainability plan and a groundwater sustainable agency. So a lot of the information in terms of water quality, how we use it in drought conditions versus normal conditions, are in that groundwater sustainability plan. There's the recycled water, and then banking and reserve programs also have a lot of contracts involved with that in terms of dictating how it's used and when it's used. Next slide. Oh, it went too far.
I'm sorry, bear with me just a minute.
There we go. Yeah, it was a little delayed. I can see you were clicking, but it wasn't progressing forward.
Apologies, I don't know what happened, but hopefully that's resolved.
Okay, so the slide we're seeing now is our water supply reliability and drought risk assessment. As Sarah mentioned, we're looking out today through 2050. Technically, the urban plan only requires us to look out to 2045, but we wanted to add in another 5 years just to, again, get the bigger picture and make sure that there's confidence in the reliability of SC water. We look at that normal year single dry year and multiple dry year conditions, and then that drought risk assessment over the next 5 years. Next slide. Additionally, part of the urban water management plan that the Department of Water Resources is really interested in is the idea of kind of all the levels agencies can pull to really understand their reliability to meet demand. And so we talked about the different supply levels that can happen. That was in the reliability analysis and the drought risk assessment, but there's also a level that can be pulled here when it comes to reducing customer demand. This is kind of the water shortage contingency plan. This is the idea that short-term, kind of maybe emergency situation, we need people to start reducing right away. SCV Water has the ability to also, put in their water shortage contingency plan and implement that. This was actually adopted in 2021. We're not making any changes to that in this urban water management plan. We're simply referencing it and providing that larger holistic picture of all the different actions that SCV Water can take to make sure they're managing near-term, long-term, and catastrophic events in terms of water supply reliability. Next slide. One of our last chapters is about the demand management and conservation. So you can see all the different programs that are currently being active for SCV Water, how many people have participated in some of those programs, et cetera. But conservation really is playing a key role. We're able to reduce long-term demand growth, just use water more wisely. But conservation can also provide additional flexibility during droughts where we can kind of turn that level up just a little bit, use a little bit less water to get us through some of those hard moments where supplies are tough, and relax it again as well. And conservation really is a reliability tool that allows us to stretch supplies. Next slide. So plan adoption and implementation. A lot of the information you're going to see here in this chapter is really like, when was the draft available? How were written verbal comments accepted? Any comments that might have changed the document? How was it adopted? When was that public hearing? And then when are we providing to give this document to the state? Next slide. The appendices, which are a lot of the technical detail that Katie mentioned early on, they're going to be available starting May 8th. So that's a climate change memo that goes into how we're looking at climate change. More specifically, it is in the chapter, a reliability assessment memo in more detail. Most of the information you need are standalone in the chapter as well. The seismic risk assessment is also there. Again, they're all mentioned in the document, but the document is the urban plan's already 200 something pages long, and we didn't want to make it 400 for you guys. We wanted to make sure it was still something tangible. So the backup material and information will be there during that second review period. Next slide. And as I mentioned, it's a nice, hefty 200-page document, which can be quite a lot. So one of the other things that SCV is looking at and doing is really developing a executive summary or kind of a large-scale overview. This is really going to be the lay description, summarizing all the things that we've done here in a much larger picture, something that you can take away that's maybe 8 pages long, gets you the gist of what you need to know, but also tells you where to go to find more information. And that's also going to be available May 8th. Next slide. All right, so now we're going to go into a little bit about the public review process. So again, we have this slide up. This is our kind of workshop to talk through what is in the plan, where to find things if you're interested in knowing. Also, what Katie talked about at the beginning is what is the scope of the plan, as in what does DWR require us to have or not require us to have will limit what you see. Our next first public hearing is going to be April 28th, which will close that public review period. So we can adjust and add in all the comments that we receive and provide a new draft for review starting May 8th. Next slide. Okay, so your opportunity to review the draft is now. It is available for public review. We will have 2 formal public comment windows, 2 public meetings and hearings, and all the comments we receive are going to be logged, reviewed, and considered before final adoption. Obviously, we have certain things that have to be listed in the plan because of DWR, so we have to make sure all the comments still end up however addressed, meet the requirements of DWR. Next slide. So there's different ways to submit comments. One is you can email UWMP, which is short for Urban Water Management Plan, at scvwa.org. There's a QR code here as well that you can scan, and that will allow you to provide comments on specific sections or ask overall clarity questions. You can also mail in comments. So the staff and the project team will review and respond to comments, refine the plan as appropriate. And the final urban water management plan will be presented at that June public hearing, hopefully with that June public hearing adopting it, so it can be submitted to DWR by that July 1st, 2026 deadline. The link to the draft, the link to the public comments is also available on the main website. So now we can pose for any questions. You can feel free to put it in the chat if you want. And then, yeah, I think there's also potentially a Q&A button. You can also put questions in if you want, but I'll pass this over to Katie.
Thank you. And apologies about that. I don't know why my computer glitched so hard when I was trying to switch slides. But let me just take a look at the comments we've received so far. I don't see any questions. I do appreciate those of you who put some comments in about what was interesting to you. Thank you for that. Happy to talk to you about that if you have any specific questions. And certainly if you're interested in groundwater, we also encourage you to participate in the groundwater sustainability plan effort, which is going through a periodic evaluation right now. So if you visit the Santa Clarita Valley GSA website, you can find information about the public hearings, or I'm sorry, the public workshops that are being conducted for that effort as well, if you'd like to have any specific conversations around groundwater. Yeah, and Dave, thank you for your comment about what things concern you. I think you'll be interested in reading the plan itself. If you do plan to review, I think a lot of this will be addressed within the plan. Yeah, it would be good to post the link to the urban water management page in the chat. Ariel, are you able to send a chat to the full group? And I don't see any questions in the Q&A. So let's just hang out a minute, see if any questions do come in. But if not, we very much appreciate you joining us tonight. We look forward to your review and comment of the urban water management plan in both comment periods. And we hope that we've developed a plan that addresses your needs and helps provide you with the information that you were looking for. Oh, we do have a question. Here we go. Okay, the question is, do you have any information which would indicate the Santa Clara River was once perennial from source to the ocean? I do not have any information about that. Sarah, do you have any information about that?
I don't have any information about that, but Ali, what about you? I know I could probably direct you to someone who could answer that question.
I think, we'll take the question. If we get your contact information, David, personally respond to you and send that information back to you.
Yeah, thank you, David. If you could, you can send a chat directly to me if that works. Otherwise, feel free to email us at the, actually, let me go back to this slide so that we're showing the contact information. You feel free to email us there if that's more appropriate. And while this isn't part of the urban water management plan itself, we can find somebody who can answer that question. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Got it. Got it, David. We will get back to you.
Thank you, David.
Okay, I'm not seeing any additional questions. We will stay on for a moment just in case, but if you do have questions, if something comes up later, certainly feel free to reach out to us via the email that's shown on your screen. The link to the plan page is now in the chat, so you can click there to get to the plan itself or use the QR code that's on the screen. And again, we look forward to your review and comment of the plan. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and being a part of this presentation. And again, we're really looking forward to your review and comment. So thank you very much and have a great evening. Won't mess up who I'm handing it off to. So, okay, ready?
Hello,